Thank you very much for staying. My name is Segal, if no one doesn't know me, and I'm the diplomatic correspondent for Channel 2 News, and I will moderate this panel about Iran and the radical changing in the region forces with this distinguished panel. I have here Ms. Danielle Pletka, who is the Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy, American Enterprise Institute, and the only one, as far as I know, that visited in the last few months in Riyadh and other countries in the region. So she has the best knowledge about what's going on, and she is also a contributor for NBC. We have Foreign Minister Ephraim Sneh, who is also the head of the Strategic Studies in Netanya Academic Center. We have Chagai Tzuriel, who is the Director General of Ministry of Intelligence Services. We have Dr. Ariel Levite, who is a researcher and former the Israeli Atomic Energy Committee, and that's all I can say, according to foreign sources. And we have Amos, who is the head of the Herzliya Conference, as a good friend. I'll start with a few minutes, and I would like also to ask my distinguished guest here to start with a short opening statement, and then we'll move the discussion on. Are we ready? Is Israel ready? Are you ready? Iran is on the move from Tehran to Mosul, from Syria to Lebanon, and the short answer is no. Okay, we're never ready for the mega changes in the Middle East, but the good news are that there is no direct correlation between readiness and success. I would like to raise 5 questions and 5 points that we will discuss here today, except of what you want to say. And one, I have to start with the news, and I think that the biggest news, the biggest headlines, is MBS, the fact that the nomination of the new heir in Saudi Arabia. And I would like to ask you if the fact that this guy that calls for a direct confrontation with Iran, that is young and is rude and is tough, is it part of the answer to the radical Islam movement in the region? This is one. Second point that I would like to raise is after years of ongoing campaign here in Israel by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, a poll that was conducted by the Likud just before the last election showed that only 2.5% of the Israelis sees the Iranian threat as a threat. What is the reason? Are Israelis doesn't get it, or maybe it's a fake threat? The third point that I would like to ask is the JCPOA is working after 2 years. After everything was said about it, is it working on the nuclear issues? The fourth point that I would like to raise, can President Donald Trump cancel the Iran deal or get a different one? And the 5th and last point that I would like to raise during the discussion is the question, which is very naive and maybe rude: is bombing Iran is the better option, was a better option, and maybe is a better option right now? So I would like to start with the first guest, that is the only active and official that is now working and have a responsibility, which is Dr. Chagai Tzuriel, the Director of Ministry of Intelligence. Mr. Tzuriel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I understand we decided on English.
Yes.
So I'd like to start my 6 minutes in the sun with a short spelling bee, if you don't mind. Bochan peta katzar belashon. So the question is a multiple answer question. Please listen and answer it at will. How do you spell Syria? 3 choices. Think about it. 1, S-Y-R-I-A. 1, second, R-U-S-S-I-A. And third, I-R-A-N. All right? Think about it. We'll wait to the end of my short remarks for the answer. What I think I'm trying to say here is this is about Iran, but I think we should talk for a moment about Syria. If you want to talk about Iran, you should talk about Syria. So, something about Syria. I think Syria is the key arena. Syria is the key. I've thought this now for several years. Syria is the key arena for two reasons. One, there is no other place in the world, I think, right now, in the last few years, where so many relationships, so many power balances are at play in one arena. So the superpowers, global superpowers, the United States and Russia, regional superpowers, Turkey and Iran, the regime, the opposition, Shiites and Sunnis, minorities, especially Kurds, vis-a-vis the United States, Russia, regime, everybody against Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and their affiliates. It's all happening on Syria. So Syria is a key arena, not because of itself, but because of everything that's happening in this arena. Second reason, what happens in Syria, in my opinion, has already, is, and will continue to affect the whole region and the world. I think it has already done so. Syria is an exporter of two very serious things. One, terror, and the other, refugee immigrants. Refugee immigrants have already changed the economic and social makeup of Jordan and Lebanon and other countries. It has already an effect on their economies and other things. It has already affected the social and political tendencies, if you will, or makeup of Europe. I think it wouldn't be carrying it too far to say that it's influenced the elections in the United States, it influenced Brexit, it influenced the elections in France, it will influence next elections, the upcoming elections in Europe. So Syria is the key arena for these two reasons. If you accept what I say, then what happens in Syria is the most important. If Syria is the key arena, what happens in Syria is the most important. And the most important thing that happened in Syria, in my opinion, since the fall of Aleppo, is the strengthening of Iran and the Shiite axis. But I think that within that, the most important thing that's happening right now, not a month ago and not in a week, right now, is happening in the most important place in the region, in my opinion, strategically speaking, and that is the border between Syria and Iraq. I think the most important place in the region is the border between Syria and Iraq. In recent days and weeks, Shiite militias with Iran behind them approached the border from both sides, from the Iraqi side and the Syrian side, and have, as far as I know, taken control of parts of the border region. That will allow Iran to actually realize its strategic plan, to my understanding, of completing an overland corridor from Iran to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. It will allow Iran to complete this Iranian front of influence, one side of which is in the eastern part of the Mediterranean with an Iranian port on the Syrian coast, and the other side is on the Red Sea, where Iran is building a forward base in Yemen through the Houthis in the backyard of Saudi Arabia on the one side and Bab el-Mandab strategic straits on the other. This, in my opinion, is the absolute most important strategic development in the region. All the rest is noise. So, I would say this.
You know, before you say this,
Please.
After your presentation, the question that is coming up, we understand what is Iran, we understand what Iran is planning. Are we ready? Is Israel ready to confront Iran as we bragged in the last few years? Here in the northern border in Syria, are we waiting for them to come in order to tackle them and to stop what you call this maneuver of the Iranian inside the Middle East?
All right. I think my first point then would be that I'm not sure we, the big we, that's not only Israel, you know, this is...
Oh, you're the director of the
yes.
Minister of Intelligence, so I'm asking you the small we.
And
we Israel, we are a strong state, right?
And I will tell you all the Israeli operations that are in place in just 1 minute. Please hold on.
The main trend.
And just the main ones.
No, the main trend.
I would say this. This is big. So I think to go it alone, or to think we can go it alone, would be a mistake. This is something that needs the involvement of the superpowers and our other friends in the region. To answer your question, I think what I'm trying to say is that while we have been talking in recent weeks, especially more than before, about the Iranian threat, not only us, others as well, the Iranians on their side are doing. We are talking and they are doing. They're moving step by step to realizing their strategic aims in Syria and in the region. So first thing I would say in order to get ready is that we first need to agree that this is the main strategic threat. Nuclear program and the Iranian nuclear and missile programs will always be very high on the agenda, naturally. But I think that the problematic nature of the nuclear agreement with Iran, will become more threatening as time goes by because of the nature of the agreement.
Okay.
But this is not for later. This is for now. Once we agree on that, we can start preparing.
We'll get back to you, Mr. Tzuriel. I would like to continue with Ms. Danielle Pletka. Do you see that as the main threat in the Middle East? The fact that Iran is trying to create this corridor from Iran through Syria, and do you think that the fact that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, was nominated this morning to be the heir of the Saudi Arabia, and with your personal knowledge of him, do you think he might be part of the answer to this aggression of Iran?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer. Thank you for having me, first of all. It's always a pleasure to be in Herzliya. And with a terrific panel as well. You know, I said to you when we were sitting in the green room that when I came into Israel, I said, please don't stamp my passport. And the woman looked at me in a very hostile way and said, why? And I said, why don't you look at my passport? And you'll figure out why, because I have a visa for Iraq and a visa for Saudi and a visa for Lebanon, and I was just in the United Arab Emirates. And I've been having this conversation throughout the region. She wasn't best pleased with me, but I'm here. So I got in. And I think the answer is a sort of a mixed one. The challenge of Iran, not just for Israel, because it's not just Israel that confronts Iran. The challenge for all of those who are ranged against Iran is that the Iranians, as you rightly described, they come to work every day. You know, the Iranians are not distracted by different challenges. They're not even distracted, I would say, by their own domestic elections process. The Iranians are focused. They're focused in Syria, they're focused in Yemen, they're focused in Bahrain, in Saudi, in Kuwait, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. And their relationship with the Russians has only complicated that. And we can talk maybe a little bit more when the Q&A around discussion about that relationship with the Russians. But I would say that the challenge is not simply what Iran is doing. It's not simply that Iran has developed expeditionary forces, that it's Hezbollah, but it's also the Hashd-Shaabi in Iraq, it's also the Houthis, it's also, frankly, forces in Bahrain. It's basically little versions of Hezbollah that they have developed throughout the region. So it's not just that which is the challenge. It's not simply their nuclear program, their missile program, all of which will remain a challenge even if Israel decides to take on Hezbollah in Lebanon, even if that happens, even if there is a war in which Israel is nominally victorious, and I don't think any of us could actually say what that means exactly, Iran will still have a nuclear program and the knowledge that goes with it. Iran will still have a missile program and the range and reach that gives them, and that's not going to go away. So the further challenge, I believe, is the reaction to Iran. It is the decision on the part of the Gulf countries, and I would say it's basically a Saudi Emirati axis that is very much led and driven by MBS, by Mohammed bin Salman, who has been not nominated because there's no question that he could be denied the nomination, has been named and is already in power as the next...
Isn't it the same as Saudi Arabia?
It is the same,
right.
but no one is voting on it. So he is the next, he will be the next king of Saudi Arabia.
Forgive me for a second to use a little bit of a Donald Trump language and ask you, we saw what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen, how they confront the Houthis.
Right.
Total losers. Can they do differently?
Well, but so this is really, actually this is where I was going, is this Saudi Emirati axis that has, that in many ways is nominally aligned with Israel and the United States against Iran. How competent is it going to be, and is it going to, in fact, cause more complications than less? And this is, of course, what we see in Yemen, is that the Obama administration basically said to the Saudis, you guys, you have a problem? Do something. So they did something, and now they are mired in Yemen, and the Houthis are not a very substantial, very potent force, and yet neither the Saudis nor the Emiratis could with any credibility say that they are winning.
Right.
Ditto, by the way, with what they've decided to do, their actions in Syria, ditto with their actions in Libya, ditto with their actions in Egypt, and we could keep going on. Ditto with their actions in Bahrain, and now, most recently, on their confrontation with the Qataris. You have to ask yourself, how exactly is this advancing the front against Iran in any way that is long-term, stable, or credible?
Okay. Dr. Ariel Levite, I would like to ask you, as an expert for nuclear, as someone that works in the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, do you think that the Iran deal, what it did on the ground, is exactly what was described? It gave Iran a freebie and a signal, a green light from the American administration. Go ahead. You have a deal. You can focus on your other means of confrontation, missiles, terror, and other means that they're using now in the Middle East.
Well, that was definitely the concern, and in part, this is the reality. I think the situation is much more complex than that, because I think the administration had the professed attitude where, alongside the nuclear deal, there was also supposed to be checking the Iranian concerns on missile arms transfers in the region and other things of that nature. Little of that has happened under the Obama administration, and frankly, very modest degrees happening under the Trump administration, which is completely incoherent, not just on those issues, but also incoherent in terms of general policy. I think the Department of Defense and the U.S. Armed Forces are doing some, but the overall policy is completely incoherent, still under review, and so on. And even on the nuclear issue, the Trump administration hasn't really picked up the pieces of the undesirable aspects of the deal that were left unchecked. I would put it this way. I think the Obama administration accomplished a great deal, but oversold the deal and undersold its risks and limitations. Risks of the nature that you have talked about in terms of freeing Iran hands, freeing some elements in Iran hands. We have to understand that Iran is a duopoly, where in the Israeli system we're used to people talking different policies within the same government. Right. In Iran, they actually carry out different policies. Right. But in essence...
If you go with the analogy, you can just say it's like arming the center of Likud party, right?
I think that
right.
I think that
Leave it to me.
Diplomatically, I would hold the line from drawing the analogy further than that. But I would put it this way. I think the Israeli policy that should have been the guiding determination behind keeping the Iran nuclear missile, whatever, and so on, front stage, has, as a result of several factors, become much less effective, much less coherent, much less single-minded. The policy actually around the broader Iran threat, and I give Amos and others a lot of credit for this, I think is actually quite impressive. In a very complex situation that Chagai has described, there is a learned alertness, there is awareness of the complexity, there is restraint, there is resolve, there is international coordination, there is a humanitarian aspect, and so on. I can go on and on with the elements. So, and of course, military preparedness for a more complicated scenarios, be they in Syria, in Lebanon, or God forbid also with respect to Iraq, to Iran. Where I'm worried is there is no coherent policy on how to deal with the undesirable nuclear aspects of this Iran deal, the missile aspects of the Iran deal of the nature we have seen on display on the last 2 days, and so on, the arms sales on the region and so on, and clearly probably something that Amos is going to be talking about, becoming a Mediterranean power.
So I will get back to you on the GPCOA to see if it works, but before that, Dr. Ephraim Sneh, you would like to start with a few remarks in Hebrew, and afterwards you transfer to English. So go ahead.
The original title of this panel is, what are you doing to thwart or to forestall the Iranian threat? What is the Iranian threat? The most immediate one. The immediate one is 150,000 rockets deployed in Lebanon, aimed to the center of Israel and to the southern part of Israel. This 150,000 missiles and rockets is multiplication of accuracy in part of them, heavy payload of hundreds of kilograms, and the quantity. We hosted here General Eshel, the brilliant commander of our Air Force. But even he cannot forestall 150,000 missiles. We are in a defensive insufficiency. We cannot pose an interceptor against every rocket which comes to Israel. So even if we will be very successful in countering this barrage of rockets and missiles, a part of it will hit, and it will bring about, I don't say intolerable, but a substantial destruction in the very heart of Israel. Given the accuracy, some very important national infrastructure and other installations will be hit. Now, there will be no other choice but to uproot this setup of missiles and rockets but by ground operation. Ground operation will be protracted and costly in all means. And given our diplomatic situation, maybe we will be obliged to stop it in a point of time which is not convenient to Israel. So we may pay the price and not reap all the benefit of our
But do you think that we are ready? Not only to confront this
There is
front.
one thing that should be substantially changed, and this is our perception of deterrence. The war that I just described, this is a war that's better to prevent than to win. How you can prevent it? By deterrence. The current formula of deterrence is that if you hit the Israeli homeland front, the infrastructure of Lebanon will be destroyed. Nobody cares about the infrastructure of Lebanon, let alone the decision makers in Tehran. They don't give a damn if the Sunnis and the Christians in Lebanon will have no electricity, no bridges, no hospital. Whom are we? In Hebrew we say, Chacham al-Chalashim. Which kind of deterrence it is? That's why, and I know it's not easy to understand, but the formula should be that if Iran, through its proxies in Lebanon, will hit Israel, we will hit the infrastructure of the energy in Iran, whatever it means. Right. This is something which can be, this is a deterrence, not GIA electricity station south to Beirut. Right. No way. So this is the first thing. There is the long-run threat, which is when this GCPOA will be expired, and if you will give me 2 minutes, I will tell you what should be done to thwart this threat, but I feel that I will not benefit of your generosity.
In a second, I will get to all of you, but I would like, last but not least, to ask Amos Gilead. You know, most of the time you're on the column of the bad news and not the good news. So, but I would like to ask you, is the fact that Iran is firing rockets on ISIS, maybe it's a good news? Okay, maybe they have all this weapon, they have all this intention, and the fact that the bad guys from this side of the Muslim world, the Shia, and these bad guys from the other side of the Muslim world, the Sunni, is fighting together, maybe it's a good news for us.
If you want me to share with you good news, it's good news.
Okay.
However,
well, it's the best that I did with you until now, which is I think 3 decades. So it's.
Let's face it, it's a very serious threat. We are dealing with it, all of us, long time. I do think we are going to face dramatic change in the Middle East. The rise of the coalition in Iran, Hezbollah, supported by Russia, and the corridors that has been mentioned, I don't want to repeat. It means very powerful coalition led by Iran. Now, Iran, they do have time. That's the good news. It's not going to happen this summer. This summer will be hot because of the weather. That's what I think. However, they do have patience and time, and they are preparing the option to exterminate Israel. I mean, they say it, they mean it, and they are serious. Now, this coalition will give them more power, as long as this regime is powerful. And there is illusion that Rouhani is moderate. I think he is excellent. He is building up the economic capabilities. They were about to collapse, and they were very close to bankruptcy. Even in Iran, they need economy. That's Professor Frankel will explain. However, I think we are going to face a dramatic threat. Iran is the only threat that embodies potentially existential threat if they get the nuclear weapon. Now, they do have the know-how, they do have the knowledge. This agreement gives them time to prepare. Mm-hmm. The good news is it also gives time to Israel to prepare itself. We need to take it, and we heard yesterday from our Chief of Staff, General Eisenkot, excellent expose, and today from General Eshel, the brilliant commander, repeating what Dr. Sneh said. We are preparing ourselves. We do have like 6-7 years. It does not mean it will end after 7 years or 8 years. It means they are preparing themselves, they are enhancing, cementing the coalition. They want to open second front in the Golan Heights. They are doing it now, they are planning it now. They want to enhance Hezbollah. They do have the unbelievable quantity of rockets, not missiles. They want to put their missiles, of course. All this coalition is a threat. Now, the main question is of this panel, what we need to do. First of all, we have got time, so we need to prepare. We need to prioritize it as the main threat. It means a lot. We are doing a lot with missile defense systems in all layers, the short-range rockets, and the Arrow 3 with, let's say, potential nuclear missiles. That's the defense. There is no alternative to prepare offensive options. Don't ask us, I mean, you may ask whether we need to bomb it or not. If we say yes, it means we will never bomb. If we say no, maybe they believe it. The best way is to say all options on the table. Mm-hmm. Why we need to give the Iranians the option to understand what we are doing? We need ambiguity. That's what we need. We need to be powerful. We need to deter them, but that's not enough. What does it mean, deterrence? If I remember what they used to say, the moment they get nuclear options, they will threaten us every day. That was said by Admiral Shamkhani a long time ago. That's what said by late Rafsanjani that died naturally or unnaturally. It depends who you ask. He's dead. However, we remember what he used to say. Jafari said yesterday what the General Eisenkot said. Altogether, they are the main threat. And rise of coalition at the expense of decline of Daesh, that's the main strategic message. Now, operationally, offensively, defense, and so on, and, of course, the main focus of intelligence, we need the excellent intelligence. I can share with you that I do think we have developed excellent intelligence, either it's the Mossad or the military intelligence, but there is no enough here. The sky is the limit. We need to go with them. They are very smart. We haven't mentioned the cybers. They are also very impressive in cyber. I mean, they are the real threat as long as the regime is under Khamenei or his successor.
All right. Chagai, Tzuriel, when we're speaking about what we are doing, the question is maybe it's fair to say that the Obama administration bought us time, as Amos said. There is time to prepare because they took the nuclear issue and put it into a freeze. They said they cut the path to a bomb. Maybe we can argue about it. And the main question is about facts. Do you think, in your position, that the Iranian keeping the agreement? Do you think there's any chance that the current American administration will change the deal? And if you can recommend Donald Trump something, can you tell him, Donald, do what? Cut the deal, break the deal, or enforce it differently?
I'm not going to, especially because I'm
Why?
still
Why
in
you
an
don't
official
answer the
position.
question? Just answer the question.
Well, it's very simple why. Because it would be a terrible mistake to give suggestions to the American administration from this podium.
I think they need it. I have to tell you. I think they need some advice.
That, too, is a statement that would be a mistake for me to say.
Okay, that's true.
However, I think some people here talked about, and you asked about the time that we have to prepare, but I have a feeling that much of what has been said here was about preparation in the military, intelligence, and other, in that sense. There we may have time to prepare, but I think, and that's my main point here to this afternoon, I don't think we have time when we're talking about the formation of the strategic map of influence in the region. That we don't have time. The Iranians are creating facts, political, strategic facts on the ground now. So there we don't have time. And there, too, I believe that the emphasis should be on the political side. That is, we need to come to understanding. I'm sure, by the way, make no mistake, the Israeli leadership, government, prime minister is working very hard at what I'm about to say, I'm sure. What I'm saying is we should do more and we should not stop. That is to say, we should work first and foremost to reach understandings with our main strategic ally, the United States, to make sure that we see eye to eye what needs to be done.
Do the Iranians keep the agreement?
I think what's important in this regard is what the Americans think the Iranians are doing. If the Americans say...
No, but what do you say? You have the intelligence.
Excuse me, that's not what's important. What important is what the United States says. If the United States says that they're keeping the agreement, that is what's important.
Okay.
Wait,
right.
Just 1 second. One more second. I think in addition to reaching understandings with the United States, we should also continue to use the dialogue we have created with Russia, because my opinion, despite the very sensitive issues now, United States-Russia, United States and Russia are the key to influencing the situation in Syria, Iraq, and the ability of Iran and its proxies to base themselves in those arenas.
Right. Ms. Pletka, maybe you can share us a little bit of information. Do you think the Iranians are keeping the agreement? And as a conservative that works with the Republican Party, do you think that this current administration, the Trump administration, can do better, can change course, and it has the guts to confront Iran?
I don't have the diplomatic recourse to escape this question, do I? So the problem with the JCPOA, as I think everybody in this room is well aware, is that it is an extraordinarily generous agreement, and that it provides all sorts of ways that Iran can be in compliance with the letter of the agreement and not in compliance with the spirit of the agreement, and can continue its nuclear weapons work. And this is what we see. So, for example, you saw this week there were additional reports that at Parchin, Iran is conducting testing for triggering and nuclear explosives. Okay, the IAEA is no longer allowed to visit Parchin. We can we can, till the cows come home, say that that was a really lousy deal and that it was a bad agreement. I don't think there's much contest, even from Obama administration officials. In all honesty, suggest, well, it's not a perfect agreement, but it was the best agreement we could get. Well, that's not my perspective, but it is the agreement we have. And within the confines of the letter of the agreement, the Iranians can continue very substantial work on their nuclear weapons program without breakout. That positions them for a very substantial breakout, as even the former president said himself, in 10 years or 10 plus years. And on the missile program, obviously, we know that the constraints really aren't there. In fact, there are fewer constraints now than there were before the JCPOA. So from that standpoint, are they violating? I think the answer from the Trump administration is the one that they were forced to come to, which is no, according to the letter of the agreement, probably they are not violating. That's how awesome it was. Is what they're doing right? They're really in a box. That's why that was the beauty of this arrangement from the standpoint of the Obama administration and from the Iranians. There's a reason why everybody in the Gulf thinks that basically Barack Obama was working on behalf of the Iranians. It's a very hard agreement to walk away from, and the American administration is caught in a box. They do not want to be the ones to walk away from this because all of the obligations are now on Iran, not on us. Right. So if we walk away, that frees Iran while having received all the profit up front. Now, there are obviously costs that can be imposed on the Iranians, and that's the strategy that's being pursued right now, mostly by the Congress, I would say, but certainly to some extent also by the Trump administration. And that is not ripping up the agreement, but doing what President Obama suggested he would do and didn't, which is pushing back on the Iranians on the missile front, on the financial front, on the support for terrorism front, and on the human rights front. So you have right now the meeting of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. That is actually sort of a secret weapon, if you want, because it is a way of imposing financial costs on the Iranians that are not directly imposed by the United States. By stigmatizing Iran inside the international financial system, by denying them the ability to have correspondent relationships, by denying them the ability to have letters of credit, it thereby constrains a lot of companies who would otherwise be delighted to do business. The Chinese, the Russians, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Brits, all of them would be delighted to do business with Iran notwithstanding. But without that financial security, right, they will be very risk averse. So that's the way to push back on the Iranians. But it seems to me that is not going to be the silver bullet that wins this for us. There needs to also, in addition to what my colleagues discussed here, which is deterrence, and which is a very substantial infrastructure of deterrence on the part of the Israelis and others, there also need to be very serious cost-imposing strategies. And that's where I think everybody is basically falling down. The Iranians are able to do what they do, where they do it, basically for free. I mean, you could suggest that the Saudis are imposing costs on the Iranians. I don't think that's how they see it. You could suggest that the Israelis are prepared to impose costs on the Iranians for what they're doing in Lebanon, for example, or Syria. But as you rightly say, the Iranians don't give a damn about whether you bomb the Lebanese infrastructure. And I can promise you that Hassan Nasrallah doesn't give a damn about whether you do it either. He may be afraid personally and doesn't appear in public. But at the end of the day, it's only the Lebanese public that's afraid. But the Lebanese public does not filter up into the decision-making process of the Lebanese government. Key decisions on these matters are fundamentally made by Hezbollah, therefore made by Iran.
So what you're basically saying that Israel needs to create a deterrence personally to the Iranian regime when he's doing his... Because it seems like the Iranians succeeded in something that we didn't. They created a front with Israel, and Israel doesn't have a front with them.
And I think that that's a very neat and interesting way of putting it. And I would also suggest that where there have been efforts to open a front with the Iranians, whether it has been ISIS and the bombing in Tehran, which we have to agree was also terrorism, or it is the Saudi support for various Baluchi operations or different kinds of ethnic operations inside Iran, none of those have been terribly effective. There are ways of imposing costs on the Iranians, and there are ways of affecting the Iranian calculus. And frankly, if I were sitting right now in Tehran, I would think to myself, I'm not really overextended. I'm really taking the opportunities that have been offered to me in Syria, in Yemen, in Bahrain, across Africa and elsewhere.
Ariel, Ms. Pletka says here, they're keeping the agreement, but it's a good agreement for them because it's keeping them, keeping the resources and the know-how, and they're waiting, as Amos said, they have time. It doesn't have to be in 2020. They don't have a quarterly program. They can do it 15 years from now. How can Israel prepare for the end game of this JCPOA? Meaning, what needs to be the strategy of Israel 10 years from now when the agreement will end naturally?
I think you're right. You're asking two questions, and let me answer the two questions you're asking. First, I think the success of Israel in dealing with the Iran issue for a decade or more was that Israel did not aim to own the Iran problem. It wanted to inspire others to do so, do a lot of things behind the scenes to energize, to support, and so on, but not to own it. The Iranian problem is a lot bigger than one that Israel can and should own. That's point number one.
Okay. So was it Netanyahu
I'm getting
mistake?
to the nuclear component in a second.
Was it a Netanyahu mistakes to own it and to take responsibility for the Iranian threat?
I don't want to venture into Israeli politics. I don't think it's useful to do so. All I'm saying is, as a rule of thumb, owning it is not going to serve our bidding. Number one, I think Chagai is right. Number two, for the moment, the Syria problem is more acute than the Lebanese one, and so on. I slightly disagree with him. I think the Syrian-Jordanian border now is the most acute issue. Syria, Iraq comes second, but maybe they can debate this offline, and so on. On the nuclear issue, the things that the IAEA is able to measure, Iran actually complies with. However, there are many more ambiguities built into the agreement, both into the JCPOA and to the Security Council resolutions, that if you actually take the talking points that the Obama administration put forward of what the deal is, and you actually compare it to what the deal actually is interpreted to say, there is a huge, huge discrepancy between the two. To give you one example, is the deal supposed to actually monitor and restrict weaponization activity? If so, who is supposed to do it? The Russian interpretation is very clear. It's not for the IAEA to do. There is no resolution of the Joint Commission of who should actually be in charge of looking at weaponization. Is the IAEA doing it? There are arguments that it is, and there are arguments that it's not. Is it an important part of keeping us aware of whether the deal is actually implemented effectively? Are the Security Council resolution part or not part of the deal? Because if they are, dual-capable missiles, however interpreted, are they able to test them only if they have nuclear warheads, or dual-capable missiles or shouldn't be part of it? The Iranians defiantly are proceeding with dual-capable missiles. I could go on and on with the list. Procurement is another issue. Ease of inspections is another issue, and so on. So first of all, the IAEA is monitoring certain things, and those things Iran, by and large, is complying. The IAEA is not monitoring some aspects, and so on. Number two, the deal was in essence a gamble. It was a gamble on many fronts, but one of them was that we mortgage the future, and when we get to the 10 or 15 years time frame, Iran will not exercise the legitimacy it has gained for complying with the agreement for so many years, right, and at that point be able to scale up legitimately its activity to the point of being a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from the bomb, right? That's already not that far away. Are we comfortable with Iran being in that position? Can we try and rewrite the deal on Iran specifically, with Russia objecting, China objecting, and the Europeans rushing into Iran? The answer is probably no. So the answer to your question is we need to develop some kind of an alternative arrangement which would bound where Iran can actually develop its capability. Could it be done by Israel and the United States alone? No. Is the U.S. has to be an important part of it? Yes. Does the U.S. have the bandwidth to do it now? The answer is no. Does Israel have the bandwidth to do it now? The answer is maybe. So I think that we are really facing now is a very delicate situation. On the one hand, we're saying Syria, 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 but Israel should only be part of the equation, and hopefully quietly so, building the coalitions, using intelligence, humanitarian, whatever, all the other aspects. And at the same time, we don't really have the time to worry about the longer-term nuclear issue. Mm-hmm. We really have to start working on it, because we need to build something that otherwise, if the threat would be bomb or not bomb, we'll get another terrible deal in place. And because people say, well, we saved the world, we want another 5 years, but this time they won't be 6 months away, they will be 3 months away. Would that be reassuring?
Ephraim, it seems like in this bending between the Obama administration and Trump administration regarding Iran, something was forgotten that was maybe some sort of a consensus a few years ago, and the two words of a regime change. Regime change in Iran. Is it still an option?
Unfortunately, this is the best solution. It should come from inside the Iranian society, but there are no partners for this solution. What's going on now is just the contrary. The way that the West is courting the Iranian regime makes the Iranian people more desperate and cynical, and they will not go to the streets to change the regime while they have no support from the world. So I love the words, but all the others hate it. And that's why...
So you think it's off the table?
Unfortunately, it's out there are no major international forces who are ready to support it, even when there is a readiness inside the Iranian people. The election of Rouhani gave a signal that the Iranian people want a different regime. Rouhani was the best option that they had. But there is lack of resolve and lack of ingenuity in the main Western players to do something about it. But there is another factor which goes together with what my colleague says. We don't know 10 years from now where Iran may be nuclear, who will sit in the White House, what setup will be between Russia and the United States. We cannot rely on or exclusively on a support of global superpower in our confrontation with Iran. And as we often say, and you mentioned Mohammed bin Salman, the natural allies here are the countries which confront directly Iran from the other side of the Gulf. If we could build with them a real alliance based on the combination of their wealth and our technological and military superiority, then it could pose a real answer to Iran in all kinds of ways. Mm-hmm. But, and here I have to warn, don't buy what some Israeli politicians try to sell, that we can reach such alliance while bypassing the Palestinian problem. Right. There is a price for that. The price is well known. And if we don't ready to pay the price, will be no alliance, and we will be alone in front of nuclear Iran. We have to know it.
All right. Amos, do you think it's realistic? Do you think that the main fear of us from Iran and the main concern of us from Iran and the main concern of Saudi Arabia and Gulf states from Iran can create operating coalition? And if so, can we trust them? We always says, the moderate Arab states, and we speak about Saudi Arabia. But come on, this is not a moderate Arab state. Maybe they're good for us, but that's not a moderate Arab state.
We do have opportunity to be part of this Sunni coalition. If you ask me whether we can trust any coalition to prevent or to preempt the Iranian threat, the answer is no. It's like trusting the internal changes in Iran. We cannot foresee it. Maybe I'm wrong, but there is no energy to do it. Alliance or undeclared alliance with the Arab countries, that's what is going now with the leadership of the United States, I must say. And that's excellent, I think, the policy of United States under Trump to enhance the Sunni bloc under the leadership of the United States. The whole issue of the Palestinians is important to widen and to make it more qualitative, these allies. But it will not change the nature of the Iranian threat because one simple reason. They are going to have coalition, very powerful, and they are determined to reach the nuclear. I would like to mention something that hasn't been mentioned here. We are going to face another fiasco, in my opinion. I think this agreement is among the worst in the world. United States of America has given legitimacy to Iran to develop nuclear. Now, there is argument, discussion, whether it's after 10 years and 15 years. Based on simple mathematics, after 10 years passing. After 15 years passing. Well, it's a short period of time. And they will prepare. I think they are respecting the agreement because they do have the option to be recognized as a nuclear superpower. Jafari, yesterday, has upgraded. Jafari is the commander of the, it was mentioned by his chief of staff. He has upgraded the Iran ambitions to become global force like Iran. Now, I'm concerned about North Korea. This is the next fiasco that is waiting for us. I remember myself dealing with it. I don't want to share with you when, because it's like archaeology, with the United States. Expectations about, there was Carlucci, and who understands. Anyway, I'm concerned that North Korea will develop nuclear weapon against the determination of the United States, because I cannot imagine they can prevent it unless they take military option. Military option is China, military option is Russia. And based on the declarations of US, if they don't prevent it, it will be disaster because the Iranians immediately will follow it. The Iranians do have the infrastructure of know-how. They do have the knowledge. They do have the scientists. It's like frozen. We need to learn from history. It's like what happened in 2003. They respect the agreement as long as it serves their ambition. They are building more missiles. They are enhancing Hezbollah and so on. That's the main challenge. What we need, with all due respect to international cooperation, that I do respect very much, with US is very important. If we don't have other options on table, we will lose also our deterrence. That's the main issue. It's very simple.
I would like to ask you one quick question to all of you, but please, yes or no question and only one sentence to explain your answer. Do you think that in this scenario that you are describing of confrontation between us in one end and Iran on the other end, there can be, in the next 10 years, a situation that we will not need to have soldiers fighting with Iranians? Do you see an Israel-Iran war in the next 10 years?
You ask who?
You.
Ah.
I'm asking everyone, but you will be the first one.
To give up soldiers? Well,
No, I'm asking you, if this, when you're speaking about a confrontation, it can be a diplomatic one, it can be a secretly one, you know, that we're working beneath the table, behind the table, off. But to the best of your judgment, this trends that is colliding, will it have to be, in the end, also a war between Israel and Iran? Will Israel have to have a war with Iran in order to stop this trend of extremist Shiites that's coming from Iran to Syria?
We need to use all options to prevent it. However, what I see in my imagination, much more powerful Hezbollah with rockets and missiles. It depends on them. I can see very clearly another front in the Golan Heights. They are working on it now. It's not my imagination. I'm not sharing with you some imaginative ideas. It's facts. Okay. I see the coalition that is rising at the expense of the declining Daesh. At the end of the day, this is the same regime. We do have hopes and prayers they will disappear. There are some miracles in the Middle East that we can rely on them. I'm not recommending to rely on them, really.
Ariel?
I see a much higher likelihood that the U.S. would clash militarily with Iran over the next year, than I do see an Israeli confrontation, number one. Number two, I think there is a much higher a prospect of Israeli-Iranian confrontation over either Lebanon or Syria. We have already killed, inadvertently, some Syrians, some Iranians on the Golan Heights, not that long ago. And I think there is a serious potential that there would be sort of the indirect clash in either Syria and so on. Third, I don't think it's very likely, but we have to prepare for that eventuality. And four, I would say the best chance is ultimately an internal transformation within Iran, and I wouldn't completely rule it out The question is, what does one do to try and move it in the right direction? I think lies more in the direction of Jacob Frenkel than it does in the military and intelligence sides.
Chagai.
I think we should use deterrence, which comes up here about every 5 seconds, to shape. We should use deterrence to shape, not to deter, but to shape. Let's use the opportunity we have now where our deterrence is pretty good. We're in pretty good situation to try to shape a reality in which we don't have to own this issue ourselves, but rather through interagency cooperation, work with the others, with the Russians, with the Americans, with our Arab neighbors, to convince that this is a regional and global issue, and to create a situation where they work to block and push back Iran militarily. That is to say, not allow Iran to base itself militarily in this region, and not have to reach a situation where we clash with it directly.
Fine.
Iran gets stronger. Nobody seriously is standing on their way. And the result we see now in Syria and in Bab el-Mandab. If it will continue, Israeli-Iranian confrontation is unavoidable, as long as this regime is sitting in Tehran. What we can do is to have a reliable, serious deterrence in order to gain time that hopefully will be either mainly internal change in Tehran that can make it unnecessary. But if things take like this, the confrontation is unavoidable. We had already confrontation with Iran in Lebanon and actually in Gaza.
Right.
Who sent to the Hamas the missiles that were launched on Israel? Iran, not Zimbabwe. So, to your question, we already had. If things will go like this, and it was mentioned here, the corridor, the Golan border, these are the new sites of future confrontation.
Ms. Pletka.
No, I don't see. Is this on? I don't see any real prospect of direct Israeli military confrontation. I think that there's a habit, which I admit that sometimes I've engaged in as well, to analyze this from the perspective of the place that you're in. And the better question to ask is, do the Iranians seek a military confrontation with Israel, a direct military confrontation with Israel? What we see over the last 30, 40 years with the generation that was behind the Islamic Revolution in Iran, both first Khomeini and then Khamenei, and the coterie that has run the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps since the end of the Iran-Iraq War, is absolutely no desire for direct confrontation with anyone. Iranian strategic doctrine, our research, and one of my colleagues, Matt McInnes, just put out a very large piece of work on Iran's strategic calculus. Iran prefers to work through proxies. What they're doing now is they're developing their proxies. There has been I think that there has been a strategic doctrinal change inside Iran. They are moving from non-conventional to the use of conventional forces as well. We've seen that in the deployment of their Artesh, their regular army inside Syria. But at the end of the day, Iran's aim, the number one aim of the Iranian regime, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, is not the annihilation of the State of Israel. The number one aim of the Islamic Republic of Iran is to keep themselves in power. This is their priority. They will not put that at risk. They will not take their eyes off that ball at any point. If there were for them a low-cost way to challenge Israel, then I think that would be on the table. But there is no low cost. One thing you have ensured, and we can talk about deterrence and we can talk about the tools, but at the end of the day, there is no low-cost way for the Iranians themselves to take on the state of Israel in a serious way. So they are going to continue to work to consolidate their power. They are going to continue to augment their conventional military. They are interested in regional dominance. They are interested in regional hegemony. They don't want to own Yemen. They don't want to own Bahrain. But they want the region to be unstable, and they want their power to be such that they can translate it more than across the region, but also globally. I don't see that Israel interferes with that effort, and I don't think that they calculate that Israel interferes with that effort.
Is it fair to say that the Iranian can say to themselves, well, you know, we hear Donald Trump, but we don't, nothing to fear from. After 2 wars and trillions of dollars that the United States invested in the Middle East, he won't be able to convince the public opinion in the United States to go to another round, even against Iran.
I think first of all, Donald Trump has made clear that he's not interested in future military operations in the Middle East. Now, obviously, we see something very different in the escalation in Syria and in the escalation in Iraq and in Afghanistan. But in terms of opening a new front of confrontation with the Iranians, I don't think that's credible. But the more important question, you know, I don't get a phone call every morning from Jafari telling me what they're thinking on that particular day. But let's look what the right thing to do is to look what the Iranians are doing. What the Iranians are doing is that they have very substantial forces on the ground in Syria. They've got their own IRGC limited, but they've got the Hashd al-Shabi, they've got their proxies, they've brought in Pakistani and Afghan Shia proxies, that they're working with the Houthis to have additional proxies. They are not acting like a government that is worried about what the Americans will do. They've confronted our shipping in the Persian Gulf, and they've continued to do so regularly with IRGCN, with the IRGC Navy. They haven't stopped doing that. So from my perspective, looking at the actions of the Tehran government, and particularly of the more hardline factions within that government, you do not see that they are acting as a government that is afraid of the United States.
Yes.
Just one sentence. I think the name of the game ought to be to prevent the territorial link between Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. That's what the U.S. should focus on. That's what Israel. If this link exists, we're in trouble.
What do you mean link?
The link is the territorial bridge,
okay.
including
Link.
demographic,
Right.
that they're building. This ought to be the #1 goal we all pursue to prevent.
So
and
maybe
that's the ball we should keep our eyes on.
So maybe the answer is to have the influence to create the independence Kurdistan. That will be the buffer zone for this.
I think the U.S. is actually trying to do it as we speak.
No.
I think the U.S. is formulating now, if I'm not mistaken, its policies regarding Iran and what we should try to do through our dialogue, strategic dialogue with the United States, is influence that process.
Okay, I have to conclude, but I would like to ask you Amos, one last question. I started this panel with the question, how comes the Israelis, in every public polls, when they ask them, they don't see the Iranian threat as a real one? After an hour spending with the best expert we can have on that, can the Israeli public has a reality check, or you don't convince him hard enough?
We don't need to convince them. We need to be sure that this is a real threat. But if you have so many press, I'm not expert to your question, so I'm amateur. How can I know why they are not impressed by the real threats? My speculation is, if you do have so many other threats, like Professor Melnick has described yesterday, and it described in other places, even in this conference, why do you need another threat that your borders are so quiet? If the borders are so quiet, why you need to bother about so many threats? It's better not to recognize the threat and to deal with, this is expensive, can I get apartment? That's concrete threat. The difference between the macro and micro, I'm repeating what Professor Melnick said yesterday. That's clear. We talk about nuclear threat. The public says, bullshitting on us another time. Right. Why do we need to do it? 10 years from now, let's wait and see. Some miracle will help us.
With that happy note, I will conclude
anyway,
the
this
panel.
is a serious threat and to be continued.
All right. Ms. Pletka, gentlemen, thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.